Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a special book news video covering 4 breaking book news stories. In fact, one of the stories literally broke as I'm making this video. I initially recorded this video with 3 stories, and the 4th story dropped immediately after I finished recording it, so it's take 2 here. The first story I'm going to talk about is a book announcement story, and the rest of the stories are all cover reveals. So let's start out with the big book announcement story, and this is for Star Wars. They announced just this week that there is a new Star Wars trilogy coming out starting in February 2025. The name of the trilogy is the Reign of the Empire series. And this will have 1 book a year releasing, so 2025, 26, and 27. And the first book is titled The Mask of Fear and is written by Alexander Freed, who has written a bunch of Star Wars stuff. The second book does not have a title yet, but it is written by Rebecca Roanhorse. The third book is untitled, but will be written by Fran Wilde. And let me read to you from the announcement, which came from the editor of the Star Wars books, Tom, over on Twitter. The entire goal of this trilogy was to tell stories with the same intent and specificity and sense of place and people and saying something real that's Andor does. We want to honor that as best we can, acknowledging it's a bit of a ludicrous and lofty goal. Each book will cover one portion of that near 20-year gap, starting with Book 1 during Empire Year 1. The series will jump forward with each book. We're really taking advantage of the amount of time so each book can be a full, complete story, kind of like House of the Dragon Season 1 did. And so this trilogy will focus on some characters like Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera. They were really influenced by Andor and its storytelling, bringing a kind of political thriller sense, a political storyline. And they brought in 3 different authors, which I went back and checked. For the adult books, we have never had a trilogy written by 3 different authors. We have had trilogies all written by the same author, and we have had unofficial trilogies where an author wrote like the first and third book and a different author wrote the second book, specifically the Callista trilogy being that. But we've never had in Star Wars different authors for all 3 books. And you might say, wow, that's really crazy. It's not. In Star Trek, this happens all the time with their publishing schedule. There are dozens of Star Trek trilogies, book trilogies, that are written by 3 different authors. You know, one author did book 1, one did book 2, one did book 3. And typically the way this works is that the authors and maybe even the editor will have regular meetings and they'll make sure that everything's lining up well. And so I think there's great potential here. Now, regarding the 3 authors, I thought I'd give my thoughts on it. I'm very excited for these authors to come in because we have Alexander Freed, who has written several Star Wars books already. Let me grab them off of my shelves to talk about them. The first book that he wrote was Twilight Company, the first Battlefront book, which is actually a really entertaining book, and I think it's pretty good. And then he also wrote after that the novelization of Rogue One, which is his best book in my opinion. It's my favorite novelization of a Star Wars movie. It's not necessarily my favorite. It's like number 2 or 3 for me in my rankings of Star Wars movies, but it is a tremendous novelization. And I think that what sold me on the idea of him writing for this series was this book because he added so much great stuff to it. And that stuff included Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and Saw Gerrera, the characters from this trilogy. He also wrote a series that I didn't particularly love, which was the Alphabet Squadron books. He wrote the first book, Alphabet Squadron, which I thought was okay. And then he wrote Shadowfall and Victory's Price, which over time, I rated them way too high at the time. I didn't really like these books. So he's got kind of a mixed track record, but I still think a pretty good one. And then we have Rebecca Roanhorse, who hasn't written as much. She wrote one novel, Resistance Reborn, which was, I thought, very entertaining and very much rewarded you for having read all the other books up until this point in the publication. However, it's not the best plotted book, and so I'm hoping that she's able to do good plotting with the next one. And then Fran Wild has never written a Star Wars novel before. This is her first one. However, she has written a short story before. I haven't read the short story, but she has written one for, I think, one from the Certain Point of Views. I think the third one. So that is that trilogy, and I particularly am interested in it because of this. We had a bunch of High Republic and Acolyte books announced. In fact, just last week as I released this, I had an entire segment, my lead-off segment was talking about how they announced 2 Acolyte tie-ins, and we already had some High Republic books coming out on the same time. Quarter 1, 2024, looks like it's mostly going to be High Republic stories, and then Quarter 2 looks like it's going to be Acolyte, which, again, ties into the High Republic. So I was thinking, when are we going to get something else? And I even asked, that on Twitter, and the editor, Tom, said stay tuned, which he obviously meant for this announcement of the Reign of the Empire trilogy. But it seemed like they were really heavily catering to the one audience, and I've always felt you have to have the different types of stories. You have to have a prequel story regularly. You have to have a, original trilogy feeling story. You have to have the more action stories, the political. You have to balance the stories so that fans don't feel, well, they're not publishing the books I like anymore. And so I think this is a very good thing, because I think Alexander Freed specifically will bring that differentness that's needed for the political storyline here. So I'm really excited. So that is the first major news. That's the real big thing that I really wanted to talk about. But I also have several book cover reveals, and some of them I'm super excited to talk about. We have the cover reveal for James Logan's second book in his last Legacy trilogy, which is titled The Blackfire Blade, and it looks like this, and it's an incredible cover by the wonderful Jeff Brown. And Jeff Brown also did the cover for the first book in this trilogy, The Silver Blood Promise, which I just recently read. My review is coming soon, and it's my favorite fantasy book of the year and one of my favorite debuts ever for a fantasy author. This is an amazing book. I love it so much. And so I'm so excited to get this cover reveal. We know it's coming in 2025. We don't know when yet. I would guess probably about May or June, about the same time that book 1 was released. But we don't know when it's coming out, but specifically, but we know 2025. And Jeff Brown is doing a terrific job with every cover he produces. He's got a style that works and is really good, and it really works for authors and for fans alike. And this is from Tor Books, so I applaud Tor Books for going out there and being willing to do the full cover art, because usually they don't, and the other publishers aren't doing it much anymore except for Baen. So good for them for choosing great cover art here, and for the second book, The Blackfire Blade. I'm so excited for that. The third story I want to talk about is the new cover art for Strange New Worlds Asylum. I brought you the news about a week ago in a previous book news video where I talked about how this was a missing cover. We had the cover for the third Strange New Worlds book and the first one, but we didn't have cover art for the second one, which was coming out before the third one, and it made no sense. Why do we have the cover for the one coming in next year in 2025 when it's halfway through 2024 and we don't even have the one that's coming out this year? It made no sense. However, we have the cover now, and it looks like this. This is a book by Una McCormick following the characters of Pike and Una. And it's really funny because the character of Una was named after Una McCormick, partially. She didn't name the character. I believe Greg Cox named the character, or maybe it was one of the other Star Trek authors. But it's named after Una, and so now she gets to write a novel featuring that character, which lots of us are excited about. Thank you to Jeremy for who alerted me that this happened. And so we finally have that cover art. We no longer have to play Where in the World is the cover art for this book. We no longer have to play that game because it's finally here. My fourth piece of book news I want to cover is really interesting because everyone else covered it, but I have a specific twist I want to put on it. And that is we have new cover art for the A Song of Ice and Fire series, or also known as the Game of Thrones series. We have new cover art for each of the 5 books that are out, and these are for trade paperback releases. The first cover art is for A Game of Thrones, the second one for A Clash of Kings, the third one for A Storm of Swords, the fourth one for A Feast for Crows, and the fifth one for A Dance with Dragons. And so that is the 5 covers that we've gotten, and there are 2 reasons I think this would happen. One is an incredibly practical, logical, business reason that is rooted in reality, that I think is the reason why it's happening. There is also a second reason that is my tinfoil hat conspiracy reason, and I want to present both to you. The more logical, reasonable answer is that the publishing industry is moving away from mass market paperbacks and is moving towards trades. There are still publishers that publish in mass market paperback. However, that number is decreasing slowly, and it's been phased out. You know, the Star Wars books are no longer really published in paperback or mass market. The Star Trek books are no longer published in mass market. It's just a trend of the industry. And there's a myriad of reasons why I could go into why that's happening. And some industry analysts I've seen are saying they'll go away completely by 2030. I don't think it's going to be that quick. I think it'll probably be 2035 or 2040 by the time that mass markets are just out of the business 100%. That being said, the reason that I think that these covers are happening is because previously it was a mass market dominated cover that they had before, and this cover art, which I think is of course better cover art than what we had most recently, is going to be for the trade paperbacks. So that's, I think, part of the reason for a little bit of rebranding and to get the trade audience. However, that is the more business, practical, reality reason for it, which is probably true. But I think there's another reason. The last time we got significant new cover art that wasn't tied into the TV show was back in 2011 when A Dance with Dragons came out. And I actually have that set. They're a bit, worn and used, so please don't judge me on them. But the first book was A Game of Thrones with that cover, just minimalist covering back then. And then you had A Clash of Kings. Then we had the third book, A Storm of Swords. The fifth book, A Feast for Crows. And then the fifth book, the one that released in this cover design, was A Dance with Dragons. And basically the reason that they did that was they knew that the fifth book was coming out soon, and so they redesigned it so that the fifth one would match this new set, because they didn't want to keep the previous set that had been, the previous design for Feast for Crows. And so I can't help but wonder, we're getting this major redesign for the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire books. Does that mean that it is time for Winds of Winter to release? That George has either finished it or is going to turn it in or has turned it in, and they're getting ready to ramp up the release? I actually posted on Twitter my theory that it's going to be announced in August. It may not happen. It probably won't happen, but that was my theory. And several YouTube reviewers and A Song of Ice and Fire fans have talked about this. One prominent person I'm going to mention is Quinn the GM, who I follow. A few weeks ago, he made an excellent video with his hypothesis about why it would be announced in August and why Winds of Winter might be coming soon. And I really like his reasoning that he outlined in that video. But he made that video and outlined a bunch of reasons why there are indicators that it might be coming out. And then this announcement happened after that video. So it's like a further indicator. Again, could be total tinfoil hat conspiracy. I really am intrigued by this idea. And so we'll have to see if this all comes to fruition. But it's interesting that they chose this moment. Why didn't they make this announcement, 6 months ago and had the new cover arts release, the new versions release with the release of House of the Dragon? From a business synergy perspective, it makes sense that Bantam would want to release the covers right as the TV show's dropping. And as people are talking about the show, they'd say, oh, I need to go get the books that are, connected to this. I mean, it's different parts of the series, but you know what I mean. And they didn't do that. So why announce it now? Why wait till after the show's done? Just food for thought. So those are the 4 news stories. A new trilogy for Star Wars and a bunch of new covers are announced. And finally, the Star Trek cover is out after forever of waiting. So if you are interested in any of these stories, let me know your thoughts on them. Do you think Winds of Winter's coming out? What do you think of this new Star Wars trilogy? What do you think of that awesome cover by Jeff Brown? And are you a Star Trek reader? Let me know any of your thoughts on any of those down in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.